Well, good afternoon, everyone. Or maybe it's not good afternoon for people that will be viewing this. But my name is Hanson Hom. I'm a retired community development director, and I also coordinate the chapters and Planning Emeritus Network Oral History Project. And I am very pleased to have Mark Rhoades before me to be interviewed. You know, I've known Mark so many years, and he has a definite reputation for someone that's really passionate for what he does, and some really good causes that he advocates for. So it's really a pleasure to have me sit before you and ask you questions, Mark. So welcome. So to get started, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Hanson, and I really am appreciating the moment here. Having just been told that I've been accepted to the College of Fellows for the American Institute of Certified
congratulations. Much deserved.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm still pinching myself, as I said, and I can't really believe I'm sitting here today for an oral interview about my work and my career, and so I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
No, I think you have a lot to share with all planners, especially the up-and-coming planners, you know, and you have a long career in your life in the planning world. So hearing your insights and suggestions will be wonderful. So,
Okay.
But I know that you oversee the principal and owner of Mark Rhoades Consulting Group. Maybe talk a little bit more about just your general career path, kind of like the beginning interview question. You know, tell us about yourself.
The origin story.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I was born and raised in San Bernardino, California, the Inland Empire. A proud child, mostly. But it wasn't, it's a suburban community, but my childhood wasn't in any way idyllic or anything else. I grew up in a very, very unstable family. I grew up without housing security. I think I lived in 6 or 7 or 8 different places by the time I was 14 years old in San Bernardino, including stints with grandparents and family friends at times. And then you can add to that, I am somebody who suffers, if that's the word you want to use, or benefits from attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. And I feel like, you know, as my career has progressed, it has become a superpower in many different ways, but it wasn't always a superpower for me. You know, my career path really started as soon as I finished my undergraduate degree. In 1990, I graduated from the University of California, Riverside, as a political science major, and with a minor in urban studies. And that's where my interest in cities really started to crystallize. It wasn't the poli-sci world that brought me into it, but it was indirectly. When I was a junior in college, and this is how I became a planner, my professor, Ron Loveridge, who was also the department chair at the time, and then became Riverside's longest-running mayor, and he was also a city council member at the time. I went to him as my advisor, and I sat down and said, Dr. Loveridge, I need to get the public defender's office or the district attorney's office internships next year. I want to go to law school. And he said, well, that's interesting. You've never said anything about law school before. And by the way, this is the first time we've ever had a chance to talk well into your junior year. I can tell you that if you want one of those law internships, that's going to be difficult. There's a long list of people who want them next, and you're not on it yet, so you won't graduate on time. And he said, but why law school? And I said, I don't know. I think I just want to be a lawyer. And he said, let's take a look at your constitutional law grade. He had been my professor for that class. He knew he already knew what he was doing, I think. And so he pulls up my grade and said, wow, you got a C in con law. That is the easiest law course you're ever going to take. And my jaw dropped because that was the hardest course I'd ever taken at that point. And he said, I'm not sure that that's your path, but I've got 2 internships for you to check out that are available next semester. One's at the city planning department for the city of Riverside, and one is for the local newspaper. I'm not a journalist. So I said, what's a planning department?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'm looking at your other classes. You've taken urban geography, you've taken urban sociology, you've taken these other classes. You might find this interesting, and gave me kind of a loose description of what city planning was. And so it was my first or second day at the City of Riverside Planning Department offices where I put together the fact that these are the people and this is where the decisions are made that define how our cities look and what they do and who for. I was smitten. This is what I'm going to do. I love maps. Spent my childhood looking at old maps of cities and my own city, and then I got this opportunity to come into a profession where my political science acumen and this quote unquote city planning, these city planning pieces that I'd started to put together actually started to make some sense. And so right after that, I got my first real paid internship over the course of my senior year. And then I graduated. I started my master's degree at Cal Poly Pomona that I wasn't able to finish because I moved up to Northern California. But at that point, I was working for a consulting firm and I was embedded in cities. And so I was traveling to 2 different cities during the week, getting to know city planning from really great mentors back in the day. And then I moved to Northern California, to Berkeley specifically in 1992. I worked for a consulting firm. I worked for a couple of different cities in the Bay Area. And then in 1997, I started working for the city of Berkeley in the planning department. In 1998, I was made the city planning manager. In 2000, I combined the advanced planning and current planning divisions into one land use division for coordination, communication, and just logistical and logical reasons. And we really started to do some good work for the city. We had a city council that saw what we were doing and started asking us to do more, giving us more staff to do it. And so I spent 10 years working at the city of Berkeley, and I think that's really what crystallized what I saw as the future path of the rest of my career, which was how are we going to get more housing built in this state? I saw how Berkeley was using zoning to say no. I saw how lots of other cities were using zoning to say no. We are in a housing crisis, now by the late 90s and early 2000s. We are all acutely aware of it. That crisis of availability became the crisis of affordability. And that's when I realized this is not going to happen on a city-by-city basis. We're going to need to change some laws at the state level if we're really going to start housing people. And that's kind of also where I decided or got on board with the notion that housing is also a human right. Mm-hmm. And we've got to do more for more people. Yeah. And then I left there 2007 and started my firm, Rhoades Planning Group. And we've been on the forefront of housing implementation, housing legislation, and just getting it done, figuring out ways to get it done, even in the hard cities, affordable housing, market rate housing, infill housing, sustainable, transit-oriented housing, all of the above. And that's what I'm still doing today, and I'm enjoying it. Probably, I think 2008 or 9, I was, I don't know what the word is, elected, accepted, brought into the California Planning Roundtable. And that's really helped me learn far more about the people in my profession, how the profession impacts other cities, and has given me more room to explore my ideas around land use policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. I've known you as someone who's very passionate about the issue of housing, and I think you're someone that really has. Now it's pretty common that everyone recognizes we have a housing crisis, but I think early on you were one of the, person that really was brought to the forefront and attention. I guess the question is, when did you identify that housing was such a critical area that you wanted to work in, that you felt passionate about? And how did this shape your approach to planning and life in general?
Yeah. Boy, I got beat up a lot as a pro-housing planning manager for the city of Berkeley, but I've always been passionate about cities. I love cities. I love traveling to different cities, how they're shaped, who shapes them, why, and for who. The politics of how land use accommodates or doesn't accommodate those who need the benefits of land use, in particular housing. And I saw in Berkeley, well, let me back up to about, 2000, when I passed the exam for American Institute of Certified Planners. At the behest of Carol Barrett, who's also an AICP fellow and one of my great mentors, she was my boss for a year and a half, 2 years in Berkeley. And she said, under the AICP Code of Ethics, you have different responsibilities now. You actually have a responsibility. Have you read them? And I said, yes, but you know what? And she said, make sure you read it again. You have a responsibility.
That sounds like Carol, by the way.
Absolutely. She's not going to give me the answer. You go get that answer and figure it out. You have a responsibility to speak up for the people who aren't in the room. And at that point, I had 4 years of Berkeley under my belt, and people yelling and screaming. Every single infill housing project, whether it was 3 or 4 or 5 stories, it was a war. It was just a flat-out community battle. Staff would get castigated by the public, sometimes by the decision makers, and that kind of virulently offensive response to otherwise completely appropriate housing production is really where I derived my need to get something different done. And I really started working hard with the state laws that we already had and putting them together in ways that would make it difficult for otherwise worthy housing projects to get approved. We started pushing on that. And some of the community did not like that very much at the time. People don't like change much, and that's one of the big issues I've identified early on in city planning is people don't like city planners because we represent change. Yeah. We are change agents, and that's okay. Ultimately, people get used to it. But
some do.
Some do, absolutely. And I've seen Berkeley get used to it over time, but that's really, the no's, the neighborhood people, hey, that's going to shade my tomato garden. Well, yeah, but this is a commercial zoning district right here, and this is an affordable housing project, and you want 2 stories taken off of this. That's 8 families in this project. Mm. How can you justify doing that? But they did, and they did it frequently. Almost every project. And so I realized...
Tomatoes are important.
Tomatoes and zucchinis. There were zucchinis, too. And they would bring them, proud of them, and from their garden, like, I'm not going to be able to grow this in my garden anymore. Well, yeah, but 8 families will have a place to live. Mm-hmm. Nobody was willing to make those policy trade-offs. People weren't even really willing at that point to talk about it out loud as a policy trade-off. Mm-hmm. And so that's what stoked my passion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. That's a wonderful story. Tomatoes or housing for people who need it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Take your pick.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you talk about a lot of projects that you've done, the challenges, frustrations, but you've had a lot of successes too. So looking over at all the various projects worked on or programs, what are you most proud of that you think have made a difference in the planning profession or housing or whatever?
I think, and this might be a little anathema to the way most city planners think about their work, but standing up to a community that didn't want change, that didn't want more neighbors, standing up to politicians who also didn't want more neighbors in their communities, and being sometimes that very lonely voice, speaking the truth to power. If you don't approve this, 30 families are not going to get a place to live. Explaining and helping people understand how bad rents we're getting and that this is a supply issue. And being told, no, this is not a supply issue. Developers just charge too much money. No, developers only charge what the market allows them to charge. And if there's a limited supply, then the prices go up. In doing that, in taking that stand, in being a person who told their city council for the first time ever, you can't deny this project under state density bonus law. The developer can sue the city. We will lose it, and being backed up by the city attorney, we will lose that court case. We will pay them fees, and I will still have to give them a building permit at the end of the day. I said that twice over the course of 2 years, and then after that, things started to roll in Berkeley. We had lots of big projects come through that in most places today you would think, oh my gosh, that's nothing. But 20 years ago, a Trader Joe's with 4 stories of housing above it in downtown Berkeley took 2 years to get through the process because the neighbors didn't want it.
Only 2 years?
Only 2 years. Yeah, that's fair. 2.5 maybe, but no,
I'm
that's
just
a
being
good point.
facetious.
Good point.
In this day and age.
And so, being that lonely voice sometimes at city council as their staff, advocating for housing, those are some of the most memorable. And, there's 20 projects I could talk about because, like I said, every one was its own battle.
Yeah. Well, here's an opportunity. You've had a lot of challenging projects, so if you could digest or dissect, one particular project or several where that really tested your personal beliefs and professional values, how did you, get through the fact? It sounds like you were persistent and eventually the message came through, but maybe get down to a more granular level. Give an example of a project, what you actually did to get that corner changed. Because I think a lot of planners can't do that, or is a challenge, but you've been successful in doing it. So what did you learn? What can we learn from your challenges?
This is a hard one, and I'll talk about a particular one. But you have to stand up for what you believe in. I think as a city planner, as a human in this world, and if you believe in what you're doing, and somebody is telling you that you can't do it that way, and you're just banging your head against the wall, you can't be afraid to lose your job. And I told 3 different city managers that as a very young city planning manager, I know my style's aggressive. I know it's getting hot in the city council kitchen sometimes. I'm not going to change the way I'm doing this because I think we have a moral prerogative. But if you want my resignation at some point, I'm happy to hand it to you. 3 different city managers told me, I didn't ask for this meeting, and if you change the way you're doing things, we might have a problem. So I took that as them having my back. And then we really worked hard to push things. The most comprehensive, large lesson learning project that I probably ever worked on started in policy and ended in implementation. I was the city planning manager for the first 2 years of Berkeley's downtown area planning process, which began in 2005. We had a 22-member downtown area plan advisory committee. We spent 2 years working with this committee and with the public on development, what it means, what's feasibility, heights of buildings, the different costs for different heights of buildings, land uses, all of it. This was a comprehensive downtown planning effort and a specific planning effort. So we were also looking at infrastructure. Downtown Berkeley is a very fortunate city from a transit perspective. We have 3 BART stations, one of which is right in the heart of downtown. There's these sort of necessities of us taking advantage of infrastructure like BART. And so when it comes to sustainability and transit orientation, Berkeley's downtown really is a prime place for much denser housing than the city had been willing to consider before. 5-story height limit in the downtown at that point. I told my boss at the time, we need to get at least 10 stories in this core. He was a little bit more of an old school planner, and he said, basically, well, we'll see what the community says. Well, at the end of 2 years, we got the community, and there's half of this Downtown Area Plan Advisory Committee could be called a NIMBY committee. There wasn't YIMBY yet, but there was definitely NIMBYs, and they didn't want change. And so they came along with the 10 stories, but for the months before that, we were told by all of the experts, 10 stories isn't a feasible development type. It's not going to work. Nobody's going to do that. They're just going to do the 5 stories, and you're never going to get that stuff. And so once we had the policies all buttoned up, it coincided with me leaving the city I had 2 little kids at that point, babies essentially. And as planning manager, I was going to 2 or 3 meetings till midnight every week. And I didn't want to do that, so I decided to start my own consulting group. And so I left the city. But I told my boss at the time, we should do a feasibility study now of what these policies and standards are going to do vis-a-vis the community benefits that we're asking for, which are substantial. And he forbade me to make that recommendation publicly. So, I 2 weeks later was the end of my time at the city. I'd given them a 6-month notice, and put a succession plan in place, et cetera. But as soon as I left, my new business partner and I put that feasibility analysis together, and we showed development feasibility at every story from 5 to 22 and what it meant to tie in the community benefits. And what we proved was that with all of the community benefits the city wanted, only 16, you had to get 16 stories to make it work. Well, we were at 10. Yeah. I came to the last Downtown Area Plan Advisory Committee, which was going to be a unanimous vote to send 10 stories to the Planning Commission. I made my presentation, I think much to the chagrin of my former boss, and it split the vote. So it went to the Planning Commission. I made the presentation again. I think he was even more angry at that point. But the Planning Commission provided direction to staff to go to council, get the money, and do a city-side feasibility analysis, which they did. It corroborated our analysis. The Planning Commission and the City Council then adopted a plan that allowed buildings up to 18 stories, several of them, that would be also subject to the community benefits. And then we self-certified it to the ballot. Yeah. We won. I think we got 70%, 68% of the vote from the community for that plan, and that was in 2010, I believe. So we had our plan. And then, at that point, I was 3 or 4 years out of the city. The first high-rise to want to take advantage of that new zoning, that developer called me and said, will you help us figure this out? And I said, absolutely. I had no idea that doing something that we thought that the city wanted, and me having been a part of, this is where it's all going, would come with so much anti-energy. We spent 3 years and 36 public hearings finally getting to a yes, finally. Yeah. I had public meetings where 200 people would come out yelling and screaming at me, representing the developer, yelling and screaming at the city staff, how can you be letting this happen? Yelling and screaming at whatever decision maker they could find, but hey guys, this is what the plan wants. This is density in the downtown where it belongs. So we did finally get that approved. We won the lawsuit as well, a very specious lawsuit. But that really challenged why am I doing this? What am I doing here? I've got my community who I know and love mostly, yelling and screaming at me and calling me terrible names. So I had to keep putting back in my brain, you're the change agent. It's not really about you. It's about the thing. It's an important thing to always keep in mind. It's never about you as a planner. It's about the thing you might be trying to do or the recommendation that you might be making. So be aware of that. Step back from the personal side of it. Don't let those attacks take you down.
Really good advice.
Yeah.
Especially on what you were working on.
Absolutely. I had to, otherwise I would have stopped at some point. Yeah. But we were going to get 200 new units of housing, and 40 of those units were going to be below market rate at 50% AMI. And I thought to myself, this is a beautiful project. It's coming with all of these community benefits. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Yeah. And so I just we pushed through all the noise. Yeah.
Now I remember following, because I work in the Bay Area just like you do. I remember following that process, and it's award-winning plan, so it's gotten a lot of recognition. Yeah. But I'm knowing about Berkeley that I do, I was amazed that plan got adopted, 18 stories. Yeah. I'm going, wow. Yeah. And then seeing the projects that were built after that. So I guess the question that planners would have, because a lot of cities are facing that same issue, how did you turn that YIMBY sentiment into the community support for this project? What is the secret sauce?
That same planning director that I crossed swords with on the policy stuff, and also Carol Barrett, use the tools that you have. Berkeley had done pretty good job from a sort of progressive perspective of if we want mixed use and we want these things, and the general plan had these policies in it. Pull them together. Pull them together to support what you're doing. And that advice really helped me stay focused on the thing and not the noise around me. So that I think that was a really big deal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a crowning achievement, I gotta say, and I think a lot of cities have kind of borrowed that type of thinking as they try to intensify their own downtowns.
It's true, and even here we're working on a project right here in San Rafael right now that is going to be difficult. Cities, it's the change issue. Cities, they see 4 or 5 story buildings in their downtown or somebody else's downtown, and that seems like enough. Well, okay, but we got a lot of housing to build. Where do you want to build it? Do you want it over there, or do you want it here in the downtown? And I think that the other thing is that, I've kind of skipped over the whole the state laws that I've helped put together, but writing SB 330 was perhaps one of the most important things that I've done in my career, because as I saw in Berkeley, we can't solve this one community at a time and hope for the best. There's too much self-control if we think that housing is a human right. So we've got to pass some legislation. Before SB 330 was SB 35, which was streamlined ministerial for the first time, mandated by the state for affordable housing projects. We put together the first application in the state. I was proud to do it. And that those protections, giving the politicians the ability to say, hey, this is from Sacramento. We don't have, as a city council, we don't get to say no to these anymore. So there's a little bit of giving them that. But then there's also, what is infill development? What is sustainable development? What is transit-oriented development? And how much housing does your community need to produce? And where do you want to put it? Once you start really looking at the very quantifiable answers to those questions, most people are like, put it in the downtown, and if the buildings need to get taller, let them get a bit taller. The crisis is deep in California, and so legislature has dogpiled on housing stuff. We have 100% density bonuses now. We have 6 different streamlined ministerial application processes now. We have all kinds of different tools that I think, unfortunately, because cities weren't more open to more density earlier, they're now having things foisted upon them that they don't love. And I appreciate that.
And I got to tell you, secretly, planners working in the public sector they don't want to say public, but there's almost like, thank you.
Oh, thank God. I've had so many people tell me on getting ready to have a project call or a Zoom meeting on a project somewhere, and the planner comes on before anybody else, and they're like, hey, this is really great, and I'm so glad we've got this process to do it with. Oh, I helped write it. Oh, wow. Okay.
Sometimes you go, sorry, this is just state law, when you tell
Absolutely.
Angry folks.
Sometimes that's all you can say.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on the next question I was getting at, because your accomplishments goes beyond what you've done in your own career in Berkeley and other places you work. You have a very active history working at the state level in legislation, like you just mentioned, SB 35 or AB 330, and also active working for APA and California Planning Roundtable. What is an accomplishment in that area that you're most proud of?
I think this is for everybody out there. The most important thing that I've done in my career has been to be closely involved with APA the entire time. As soon as I got out of college, I found APA, and I became the student liaison for the Inland Empire section. That's my home section. When I moved up to Berkeley in 1992, I immediately got active with the section here, and they were in the midst of planning for the 1995 national conference. So I helped out with that. Ultimately, I was newsletter editor for several years. I was communications director. I became director. And then I got onto the roundtable. I think service to the profession, staying close to the people and what's happening with it is the most important thing that I have done in my career. And I encourage everybody to do the same.
Yeah.
But then it's also given me the ability, working at the higher levels now, the last few years in particular, and especially with the roundtable, to think more broadly about how we consider land use policy and legislation. And I've had the great fortune to work alongside amazing legislators like Scott Wiener and David Chu to help review the drafts of SB 35, and then Nancy Skinner, who our state senator at the time, who called me up and said, "I'm going to write this thing called the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, and I want you to help me do it, and I want you to put your Berkeley planning manager hat on while we're doing it." And so I wrote the most operative sections of SB 330, the 5-meeting limitation, the preliminary application process, all those things based on, these are the things that a lot of cities seem to take advantage of when it comes to processing applications, objective development standards, et cetera. So the great gift of my career so far has been watching how effective those two, but in particular SB 330, how effective that legislation has become statewide and the housing production that we're getting out of it. But on the affordable side, SB 35 and the other streamlined ministerials now, that's what most of our work is. That's where I derive most of my planning joy these days. And that, for affordable housing, has been watershed across the state.
Yeah. And obviously there's always two sides of the issue, but I think SB 35 and AB 330 end up opening the door for a lot of similar kind of legislation, whether it's about ADUs or whatever, or additional laws, transit-oriented development, of the more recent laws that some people hate, but they're so necessary. But I think those two laws you mentioned kind of opened the door for the need for this type of legislation.
Well, we have a whole, I guess, panoply now of laws that are, a lot of them are niche, but we have a whole lot of new avenues to housing production now, and how you do it, how you get permitted and entitled. We have to make progress in the cost of housing production now. That's probably my next horizon, but yeah, it's really important. These things that have come out the last few years, and who knew ADUs would take off like fire?
I know. I would have never.
It's shocking, even still at the state level.
Yeah, I remember when. I was thinking, oh, people are really going to build ADUs, and now, like you say, it's really taking off. Yeah.
Oh, just in my little town, Berkeley used to do 2 or 3 a year. The year, 2016 or 17, the year after the first ADU legislation, I called up the planning manager and said, "How many of these applications do you have now with this legislation?" He said, "We have 100.
Yeah.
100.
Yeah. It's amazing.
My goodness.
And there was, before then, there was such community opposition. Oh, they're going to destroy my neighborhood. Yeah. Anyway.
LA, I think, went from like 500 to 10,000 in 1 year. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So kind of moving on to kind of the next area, and this is kind of starting to look, in a more broad scale, reflective scale, but also looking to the future. What, as a planning profession, we know there's many things we have not done well, and things, of course, we have done well, and you have a unique perspective in what work that you've done. What have we as a profession done really well, and what have we done that's resulted in unintended consequences, and what can we do better?
That's a hard question. Let me start with what I think we weren't doing well, and this really came home with the book The Color of Law. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I read that book, and it wasn't the intent of the author. He's a historian. He was talking about the book is really about the historic inequities of housing production across the country. But in the chapters of the book, you read how that was done, and you realize, I'm this person.
I know, yeah.
I've been this person.
Yeah.
This is how we got here. This is how we promulgated redlining. And what was that, 20 teens? And it really hit me. I had already been struggling with planning's obsession with context and what that meant from an exclusionary perspective. It can't look like that. It has to look like this. Well, who said so and why? And how are you going to get the housing that we need in that construct? You're not, is the simple answer. And I feel like we as planners, we need to do a better job at giving our decision makers guardrails, really, and whether they're social justice or social equity, environmental justice, et cetera, it is our responsibility to be making recommendations that, for instance, advance the cause of housing. And I don't think that historically planners were very good at that. We nibbled at the edges. We didn't have the legislation to make real differences, but we facilitated our decision makers when they said, how do we stop building housing over here? Oh, well, this is what that ordinance should look like. Do you want to put some housing over there? Nope, we just want to stop it over here. So, and we got very good at doing everything that our city councils told us to do, and in many ways, we sort of lost the ability to challenge those assumptions as we went along. I think that now the legislation is giving us the calcium for our spines to stand up in front of decision makers and say, this is what the intent of the state law is. This is what our housing needs are. Our regional housing needs assessment says we need this many more units the next time. Where are we going to put them and how are we going to do it? I think that I have great confidence that our profession is turning a corner. And that people and cities, decision makers have been forced to wise up. Maybe that's not the right term, but to be educated about, in particular, the housing and land use needs of our constituencies, and in particular, lower socioeconomic strata constituencies. And those are the folks left out of the conversation. They're working 3 jobs. They're working night jobs. They can't come to public meetings. They might not speak English. You might not have even reached out to them. Have we talked to the churches? Have we talked to the neighborhood organizations? Who have we contacted? And I think right now, planners are on courses doing a much better job of that these days, but with some sort of state law confidence in their briefcase to help them do it. So I'm watching a whole new crop of planners now who have no idea the housing wars that we fought, project by project, local agency by local agency. They've come to the profession with, well, it's easy now. Why was it so hard then? How come you didn't build more? Let me tell you a little story. But I see planners doing more now and advocating harder maybe than we used to. Even, I don't want to call it politically, as I've told all my mentees, you don't get to participate in the politics, but you're naive if you're not aware of the political construct around you. We have to be aware of that, but we're not playing to it. We have our own professional responsibilities.
And my feeling, regardless of what you do, you're part of the politics. You're not outside the politics.
Right.
So looking again at the future, I know you've advocated and you've been on the forefront of housing, and it could be housing. But look, what is an issue, emerging issue or something that's changing, maybe something planners need to advocate for, whatever it is. What's an issue on the horizon out there? You're someone that I think is very forward thinking. What is the next big thing? I don't, it's not necessarily that, but
Sure. I've really thought about this question, and I was really trying to think about, well, what's the thing that's coming that we can do? But it's the thing that happened in the 70s, 1978 to be exact, Proposition 13. Proposition 13 has got to be dealt with in this state. We've hamstrung our city's abilities to pay for their infrastructure, to pay for community needs and community services. It's really, and that's, I think, part of what I consider to be a broken state initiative system. That it was a populist vote around tax increases, and it has really devastated the state. And it has devastated the state in completely disproportionate ways because my community, Berkeley, is a high-resource community. When our citizens feel like they need something, we pass parcel taxes and we go take care of it. But you're not doing that in Oakley. You're not doing that in Vista. You're not doing that in San Bernardino. And so communities that are far less resourced, they don't have the opportunity to pass parcel taxes for community services and infrastructure. So I see that as our great challenge going forward. And cities are dealing with incredible budgetary issues as a result, not the, structural budget deficits in just about every city. I see more housing coming. I see communities continuing to grow, but I also see an aging infrastructure that we need to deal with. These are the things that I kind of worry about. But I feel like we've made enough change in the housing permitting, entitlement, production world that we can now start to move into these other areas and really spend time trying to figure out a way forward.
That's great. That's great. I'd like to end with one last question. It's really, or maybe a combination of questions, talk about the next generation of planners. You've talked about it, and I think you're particularly someone that is a perfect person to ask this question. When I've mentored young planners, there's always a question of, what advice do you have for me? When they don't all ask that, but that comes out frequently. And then the challenge of the profession, this profession, I think, is getting tougher, is very polarized, it's tough. I think in my early days it was much easier than it is now. So planners are getting burnt out, they're getting disillusioned. They go, I love what I do, but gosh, it's really tough, Yeah. What survival skills can you provide me? So for those young planners getting frustrated, that question, God, this is really what I want. I love this stuff, but man, this is tough stuff. I get beat up. I mean, what advice do you have for us to all survive this tough profession?
Man, it's
because
hard.
you've lived it.
I've lived some very difficult circumstances in city planning. I've been called all kinds of names. I've been told that children are going to be dying in the streets because of what I did. The blood will be running down. You hear that from people, and I think that it gets back to what I said about change and what you are doing as a professional, and being a change agent. Pursue your passion as a planner. You came to it for a reason. Figure out what that reason really is and lean into it. Don't compromise your standards, but grow professionally. Don't be afraid to challenge a directive. Any boss worth their salt isn't going to be angry at you for asking why. They should take advantage of the opportunity to explain it if there's a good explanation. And if there's not, then you can take that. Learn how to socialize that passion. Bring facts to bear. Use the tools that you already have in hand. Where's that language in the general plan that you want to lean into? Where's that piece of the zoning ordinance that gives you a little bit of flexibility to go just outside the box, perhaps? Don't be afraid to lose your job if you feel like you're being asked to make a moral compromise. There will be another job for you out there somewhere at some point. I've been sort of through that in my early years, and use the process to change the process. If you don't like what you see, be a part of making it different, and don't be afraid to do that. Yeah. You have great skills. In this profession, you also have great opportunity to make very small and very great changes in cities, and lots of small changes add up to great change. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be working on updating the zoning map. You can be working on business license applications. You could be working on 1,000-acre specific plans. we all make a difference where we are, and it's important to recognize that and celebrate with each other. You know, planners, we love to party and pat each other on the back because we're not going to get it from our communities, generally speaking, or from the city council.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tough job. Stick with it. It's a what do they call these professions? A noble profession, in my mind. Now to me it is because of the way we're dealing with housing on a statewide basis.
Yeah. I think those are wonderful closing thoughts. And I wish we had more time because, you know, to pick your brain about other ideas. But I wanted to thank you very much, Mark, for coming in and doing this, having this conversation. Really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Hanson. It's been my pleasure.